Hello everyone. Just finished painting this regiment for my Culloden project. A week after the, what would it be, 275th anniversary of the battle. So it's probably going to take me 275 years to complete. So this is only the third regiment I've made of government infantry. Or painted rather. So this is the 8th Regiment of Foot, otherwise known as Wolf's Regiment of Foot, because at that time regiments were often known by the name of their commanding officer. Gets a little bit confusing at this point because James Wolfe, the famous British officer who died at the Battle of Quebec, actually was present at the Battle of Culloden, but this regiment isn't named after him. In fact, this regiment is named after Edward Wolfe, who commanded the 8th, and he was James Wolfe's father. But you hear more about James Wolfe at Culloden than you do about Edward Wolfe. So it is possible to get a little bit confused in that respect. Just sort of on the subject of James Wolfe though, he at the Battle of Culloden he was an aide-de-camp to either Henry Hawley, who had commanded the army at the defeat at the Battle of Falkirk earlier, or he was an aide-de-camp to the Duke of Cumberland himself. Now, there's a famous story about how James Wolfe was ordered to execute some Jacobite prisoners and he refused. That might just be an apocryphal story. But Wolfe is supposed to have actually fought in the line at the Battle of Culloden, so he wasn't sort of performing his duties as an aide-de-camp. Now, if he fought in the line with Hawley, then Hawley was in command of the cavalry. So it seems unlikely that he actually, if he did fight in the line, that he was actually fighting alongside Hawley. So there's possibility maybe that because Wolfe's regiment, which I believe was the 45th, wasn't present at Culloden, possibly Wolfe joined his father and fought in the 8th. I don't know. It's a possibility. We'll never know. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit at this point to give you something a bit more interesting to look at. So there you can see the colours, which are from flags of war. Now, the other possibility, the other way of getting confused about this regiment at the Battle of Culloden, is that in the clothing book of 1742, the regiment is actually portrayed as having yellow facings, and the lace had a red zigzag in it. By the time of Moriau's depiction of the regiment in 1748, however, so Morio was the artist who painted the famous painting of the Battle of Culloden in about the early 1750s, but he also was commissioned by the Duke of Cumberland to depict every regiment that had served under the Duke of Cumberland in the War of the Austrian Succession. So Moriau painted a fusilier from the, not a fusilier, beg your pardon, a hatman from the 8th Regiment in 1748, and by that time he has given them blue facings and a yellow zigzag in the lace. So clearly by 1748 the 8th Regiment had become a royal regiment. Royal regiments had blue facings. In 1745 it's difficult to know whether they had blue or yellow facings. So I've chosen to give them blue facings, and that is entirely, well, it's almost entirely because the colours from flags of war actually have a blue colour for the regimental colour there. So flags of war, I mean, you've got to come down on one side or the other. So flags of war obviously decided that they were a royal regiment by the time of 1745. Or 1746 anyway, and that's what I've gone with. But if I'd had to make the choice myself, I would have chosen blue, because I think it's a sort of nice colour on these regiments. It changes, it gives them a little bit more colour, because if they had yellow facings, then the trousers or the breeches would have been red, whereas the Royal Regiments had blue breeches as well. So that is the reason I made that decision. Not much else to say on that. The figures themselves, they look at first glance as though they're in a firing line, but in fact they're actually trying to just focus in a little bit better on one particular figure so you can see with that grenadier there that he's actually his stance is charge bayonets, rather. He's not holding the musket to fire it, he's holding it charge bayonets ready to receive the Highland charge. And that's interesting in its own right, because the Duke of Cumberland famously, before the Battle of Culloden, gave his army a lot of bayonet practice, and the instruction he gave to the army was not to engage the Highlander who was attacking you to the front, but to thrust to the right and thrust underneath the raised sword arm of the Highlander who was attacking your colleague to the right of you. So it required a great deal of trust in your fellow soldiers that they were going to equally protect you from the sort of Highlander who was bearing down on you. But it's supposed to have worked. But anyway, there's at that particular time, charge bayonets was the sort of adopted stance in the way you presented your bayonet to the enemy, unlike sort of later times when it's sort of held, the lower end of the musket is held sort of lower down the body rather than at shoulder level. And I think that's everything I have to say on these particular figures. As I say, slow progress. So many other things on my worktop at the moment as well, just adding to them rather than completing any one particular thing. But for the time being, there's always going to be something from my Culloden project on the tabletop, and I just get to it in sort of rotation. So thanks very much for watching, everyone. Bye for now.